Hello, everybody, and welcome to On the Move, a show where we share transportation sales and marketing success stories. I am Jennifer Carpus Romaine, Executive Director of the Transportation Marketing and Sales Association, which is a trade nonprofit educating and connecting marketing and sales professionals in transportation and logistics. And today on the show, I have Jessica Whidt, who is the Managing Director at Warner Communications. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today, Jessica?
I'm good. I'm good, Jennifer. Thank you so much for having me on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you spending the time with me today and so excited to hear a little bit more about yourself and Warner Communications. So, can you give us kind of your history and how you ended up there and what you guys do?
Sure, sure. As you said, I'm Jessica Whitt, Managing Director of Warner Communications. Warner is an integrated PR and marketing firm. We specialize in the technology and services that power the supply chain from end to end. So that's everything from, beginning with the raw materials, renewable energy, to all the way down to last mile delivery, even recycling and waste management. So, and everything in between, of course. I joined Warner in 2022. Before that, I was in-house at commercial airlines for commercial passenger airlines for about 10 years.
Awesome. And I know one of the things that you guys really kind of specialize in with that PR is like all of the complicated stuff, like regulatory issues, and how do we talk about them and how do we present them. And so regulatory shifts can feel really overwhelming in figuring out how we talk about them when we talk about them. So, how do you advise your clients to communicate effectively when the rules are still unclear?
Yeah, regulatory shifts, they're always challenging. It feels as if recently it's been a bit more complicated than we might have seen in the past, mostly from, sort of changing rapidly, what's going on or what we should expect. And I think there's there's often a reflex to stay quiet, and just sort of see how things shake out. Companies, executives, thought leaders just like, I don't want to put anything out there in case I'm wrong. But we really see it as an opportunity for supply chain and transportation organizations because it's an opportunity to position their executives as real thought leaders in their space. The key to doing it well and doing it safely and yeah, I hate to say right because I don't know that there's any necessarily right way to do it, but what we've seen be successful is acknowledge the known unknowns. Don't try to predict the future. We none of us have a magic ball we can see into the future, but focus on communicating your company or your executives awareness of all the possible scenarios your clients could face, and then communicating how your company, your executives, your thought leaders are prepared to address it, because by exhibiting that you've thought through, you're being thoughtful as an organization around what are all the possible outcomes and then how can we support clients in any of these outcomes. It'll really exhibit preparedness, agility, and ultimately lead to trust and credibility amongst your current clients as well as prospects.
Absolutely. I love everything that you're talking about because I do think people are inclined to be a little nervous, to not want to say anything. But if you're not saying anything, you can really appear like you're not following the trends and you're not paying attention to what's going on. And so you don't have
Absolutely.
to, like you said, you don't have to like predict the future, but just have a conversation about it. This is what we're seeing. This is what we think it could mean. This is how we're responding to what we're seeing right now. All of those things are just being truthful and transparent and building that trust, like you said, which I think is incredibly important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree 100%. It's really an opportunity to exhibit thoughtfulness, and that that you're keeping up with what's going on and you're thinking about it and you're prepared.
Hmm. And so, obviously, a big mistake a company can make is just not addressing regulatory uncertainty. But on that, is there any other mistakes that you see companies make that you would suggest kind of sidestepping from?
Yeah, we the biggest one, and I don't know if it's a mistake necessarily, but we typically advise clients to steer clear of definitive predictions. Um, and unless that is for some reason part of your brand or makes sense for your business. But again, none of us are fortune tellers, and so hardline predictions can sometimes put you in a sticky situation after the fact. Um, and we also advise clients to be really thoughtful and deliberate before taking a hard stance in support or opposition of any particular regulation or other issue. If a organization or a leader is going to do so, we really encourage them to make sure it serves their business. You know, you'll see particularly some of the really big enterprise brands in the supply chain, being vocal about their position on, for instance, tariffs, or in my background in aviation, regulatory issues regarding the FAA or airspace, and those are, from my observation, I don't have inside knowledge, but I can assume that those are things that deeply impact their business. They're organizations that have a significant voice in DC and do have influence. And so I assume they're being quite thoughtful about what they, take a hard line on. And so, you know, that's the other thing. Particular leaders, particularly, we see this a lot with founders, CEOs. They have personal opinions that they want to voice. They have a platform to do so. And if it's something they're really passionate about, by all means. But ultimately, we advise, make sure it is right for your business, and that it is a message that's going to resonate with your audience and serve your business in the long run.
Absolutely. And so if someone does kind of make an error, maybe says something a little too soon, can you walk us through an example of like a crisis communication plan that you helped shape? What worked and what you didn't? What did you learn? And I think the number one step of that, whenever I did anything in like marketing, PR, stuff like this, is like make sure you have a crisis communication plan before you need it.
That's number one for sure. And I think it's, coming from a background in aviation, and obviously, we're speaking to transportation marketers and communicators. Um, we have a tendency to think about crisis in the most catastrophic terms, right?
Mhm.
And, a transportation accident, something that possibly involves loss of life. And so we have to, as communicators, particularly in transportation, also remember that, and I like to use reputation management a lot, because I do think we need to make sure we're thinking about, not, of course, being prepared for the catastrophic, but also being prepared for the what may seem to transportation communicators like the not so
Mhm.
catastrophic. Everyone's spectrum is different. If you're a consumer brand, what is catastrophic to you may be quite different than what it is in transportation. But yes, number one is having a plan in advance. I've had the opportunity to work on a number of crisis communication plans, many of them in the aviation sector. Mistakes I've made. One, not having one. So I've
Mhm.
been there.
Mhm.
Um, Learned that lesson real quick, and didn't do that again. But sort of second time around was being too high level in the plan. So, writing the plan as if I would be the one who would be executing it, or that I would have time to interpret what I meant, years ago when I wrote it, right? So, um, be as prescriptive as possible. That is what I learned. Even if you are confident you will be the one personally, you're writing it and you're the one personally executing it, the the stakes are high in those situations. It doesn't matter if it's a brand crisis, a business crisis, or an operational crisis. Minutes count, seconds count sometimes. Stress levels are high. You don't have the time to be spending the brain power on, what did I mean by this? Or
Mhm.
let me explain this to you. You want a document, or, a set of documents that you can literally just hand over to whoever is in the room that you can help you, and they can follow instructions. So just being very, very detailed with those decision trees, instructions, down to, it may seem silly while you're doing it, but down to like, how do you log into LinkedIn to update
Mhm.
things, because you don't know who you're going to have available to you in the moment to support you. Um, Crisis never happens at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday while you're all sitting in the office together. It happens in the middle of the night or on a weekend. So you have to be ready to use whoever you have to support you in those moments. And then the second lesson I've learned the hard way, and these really go hand in hand, is don't set it on the shelf. Practice, practice, practice. Engage everyone in the organization you can to practice with you, tabletop scenarios, work through the kinks. Um, get everyone on board, all your stakeholders, even your board members, of this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to say, this is what we're not going to say in different scenarios. Again, stress levels are high, minutes count. You really want it to almost be, and I by no means elevating communications professionals to first responders, but taking from the first responder playbook when it matters, you want it to be muscle memory.
Mm.
Again, not having to use that brain power, just really execute, execute, execute.
I think that all makes a lot of sense. And I was thinking when you were talking about like logging into LinkedIn and things like that. In my past, I worked for PR Newswire. And when you send in press releases, there are specific people who are allowed to approve them. And
Mm,
I worked the overnight shift. And so I would have to call and confirm these press releases. And a lot of times that person that was calling was not authorized on the account. And they'd be like, well, my boss is, it's like 8 p.m. on a Saturday. I'm like, that, like, I understand
yeah,
how stressful that must be for you, but you are not authorized on this account. We cannot send this press release unless if we
yeah,
have proper authorization. So like that kind of stuff is the thing that I think people forget about is like the people who are making this, who are building this, who are putting this together are not necessarily the people that are executing on it. What if somebody is? I very specifically remember the one person who was like crying because their boss was like at a remote cabin.
oh,
It was like that was like their
oh,
boss's like one day that they got to like fully check out. And I'm like, and she's like, I literally cannot reach her. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but
oh,
you're gonna have to. Or I was like, there's other people that can do this. You may have to try to reach them or
yeah,
whatever, but like those situations like come up, and if it is something that needs to get sent out immediately, those things are really important. So I love that you said
absolutely.
that. And even just having all the stakeholders understand and know what they're saying, and also like who should be speaking and who should be like, nope, we're
Yeah,
deferring that answer
yes,
to so and so. Like those things are
yes.
incredibly important for
Again,
sure.
you don't want to be wasting precious time sitting in a room or on a conference call or whatever it is, debating, are we going to send the statement or not, right? Get all of those decisions out of the way. And there will inevitably be someone who will magically forget that they agreed to this in the moment and be mad. But, you know, if you check that box, everything will go much smoother.
And I think too, like you were saying, like of course there are life and death stakes when we talk about crisis and like those big things, but it's not just those big things. And how you respond to that might look differently than
Yeah,
something else that might be on a smaller, not life or death scale. And so having an understanding of what those things look like and how those differences are will help too in those moments when the pressure's on.
absolutely. And what I found is helpful is incorporating those decision trees and those sort of levels of scenarios into your crisis plan.
And when we're in these fast moving situations, how do you balance that like speed and accuracy in messaging?
Once again, prepare. I mean, every situation is different. You're never going to be able to write up, statements and press releases for every possible situation, but you can certainly, you know, come up with types of situations similar that would be similar to each other, prepare things in advance that are templates or shells that you can pop information into. And then in the moment, lots of eyeballs. Do not trust yourself that you typed what you thought you typed. Do not trust yourself that everyone will interpret the way you structured a sentence the way you think you did, or what it means to you. So having, as without making it, writing by committee, you want to have a really good core group of people, whether that and from different perspectives of the organization. I usually like to recommend someone from legal, someone from operations, someone from marketing, marketing sales, and then someone that could be considered, maybe it's one of those people, but a senior leader that has committed to say, I will review these pieces of information in minutes, not hours. And I will be available. And here's my backup and my backup's backup. If I'm not available, and I delegate to them the ability to review these things, not necessarily for approval, but just because you want different perspectives. You want that double check of, did you use the right word? Is there a typo? Could this be interpreted a way that you didn't think of? And so just lots of eyeballs.
Absolutely. And I think that's so important. I do that here even. So we have a lot of volunteers that volunteer at TMSA. So like our entire marketing committee is made up of volunteers. And I will always say, okay, like if we're doing a social post, it doesn't have to be my eyeballs that check it, but somebody's
Yeah.
does. But if we're announcing a new program, or like if there are award winners that we're talking about, anything that's like super high level, then I want it to be my eyeballs, especially if it's the first time we're talking about something, because I know all of the pieces. And so even if it's not a crisis plan, but just stuff that we're putting out, like no person, no matter how smart and capable they are, is infallible to not make a typo. Like we all are capable
Absolutely.
of making those types of mistakes. And so just getting a second pair of eyeballs. But I was like, but with that, like, because when we first started really utilizing that committee more and more, they would send everything to me. And I'm like, you guys are all marketers. Like, I trust other people's eyeballs as much as mine to do that grammatic check. But here are the high level things that like I want to make sure, that we're doing. So even taking some of these cues in your crisis plan, you can put on your regular marketing plans or anything like that, just to make sure that you're having these best practices and processes in place.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And we talked at the beginning about, thought leadership with this type of stuff is really important because it's going to set you apart from your competitors, and it's going to show your customers, your prospects, that you are paying attention to trends and what's going on, which I think is incredibly important, especially in the space right now where we have a saturated market. People are trying to stand out. But what makes for an effective thought leadership strategy? Like, we know it's important, but how do we do it? How can companies kind of avoid sounding just like everybody else when we're talking about things?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it starts with outread everyone, and or hire a PR agency that will do it for you. Um, Executives, leaders in organizations, I know, very very busy, hard to keep up with everything. Although I've met some that are just voracious readers, and I don't know where they find the time, but it's always
Mhm.
impressive to me. But that is first and foremost, and just read everything you can get your hands on. Be a news junkie, but in your space, in your vertical. It doesn't mean you have to ingest all the news that's happening in the world, but really focusing in on making sure that you are up to speed in what the conversation is. And for two reasons. One is, you know, what are the media interested in discussing? What they're publishing is a good indication of what they find interesting. And, taking that one step further, if they're publishing it, it's because they think their readers will find it interesting. And so, that is a good cue to say, okay, what do my prospects, what do my clients want or customers want to know about right now? What are they interested in? And then, you know, being thoughtful about having an opinion on those topics. So not just, oh, here's how my product solves for that, but what do what as a company, what do we want our leaders, or what do I as an individual executive want to exhibit to my clients that we are skilled in, right? Because whether it's a piece of technology, a hardware, a service, your clients want to know in their decision making process, in their consideration process, your prospects, your clients want to know that you get them, right? That's
Mhm.
ultimately what everybody wants from a product or service, is like, oh, you get what I'm facing as an individual in this organization, or as an organization as a whole, and you're here to be my partner and help me solving my challenges and supporting my wins and thinking about the same things I'm thinking about. So, really starting from a place of thought leadership isn't about necessarily marketing, it's about contributing
Yeah.
to the larger conversation. And so if you I believe if organizations and if individuals come at it from that perspective of just being curious and wanting to engage in the conversation, the content flows through and is genuine and authentic and feels valuable to the reader.
Absolutely. One thing I always like to talk about is how your prospects, your customers, they don't care that like how much capability you have. They don't care that if you can do everything. They care about what you can do for them. Are you paying attention to what's affecting them? And
Mhm.
so when you build stuff like this, and this is why like I love talking about brand and PR and things like that, even when we are talking about sales, because a lot of times people are like, you don't really need marketing and sales to be aligned, but it's like you really, really do, because brand shouldn't just be a conversation that's being had in marketing. It flows through everything, and it's positioning your company in a way that you're showcasing that you understand your specific customer needs and what they want. And so in that thought leader strategy, it's like, hey, let's make sure, if we are really trying to get into the refrigerated market, that this is what we're talking about, and this is what our leaders are
Yeah.
talking about in the public space.
Absolutely. And thought leadership, having those pieces published, it's certainly not going to drive the volume that, cold outreach or trade shows, things like that are going to drive for you as far as leads go. But what we see is that it creates hand raisers, right? It's people who they see a thought leadership article published in a publication that they trust and that they read and look to for guidance and information. And they say, this company sounds really smart. They're doing really interesting things. And they come to you. And those are very, very qualified and valuable leads. So it's not, so to your point, it is an integral part of the sales process, I believe.
Mhm. Mhm. And when you're building kind of that thought leadership strategy and you're talking about PR crisis, all those things, how do you kind of build up somebody posting directly to LinkedIn and being like, this is my thought piece, this is everything that I'm saying, versus people coming on podcasts and being quoted in industry publications? How do you balance all of those pieces out into like one full scope?
Um, yeah, I mean, it's different for every organization, every client. It kind of depends on where they're at when they come to us. But it's it's holistic. It is a build. If an organization comes to us and they say, okay, we have these four leaders, we want them to be thought leaders in the space, we want to get them published in XYZ magazines, and then you go to their LinkedIn profile and it's blank. Um, well, we need to start there
Mhm.
because we have to remember that reporters, journalists, publishers, the first thing they're going to do when they get a pitch or a piece, that you want to publish with them is Google the name of the author. And so there needs to be something out there, and LinkedIn is the best way to do that because it is an owned platform and you can control it.
Mhm.
So, But if there's already a presence, if there's already an awareness about an individual or an organization, then you can take more of a three-prong approach where you're just, parallel path working to get things published as contributed articles, starting to pitch podcasts, such as this one, to say, hey, we've got an interesting executive with some interesting thoughts on XYZ topic. But also backing that up with consistent posting on LinkedIn. And I think posting on LinkedIn helps sort of keep the keep the train running a little bit, keeps the momentum going, because it shows that the individual, the organization is committed to thought leadership for the sake of, kind of going back to, for the sake of contributing to the conversation and contributing to the industry rather than just publicity.
Absolutely. And then this is just such a random tip, but as a former journalist, if you put a media contact, that person better be able to get a hold of that person that you're quoting in a press release. Because we've done, like, I've had that experience where, like, I contact the media contact and they either don't respond. That person needs to be responsive. And they need to be able, like, if you're
Absolutely.
quoting somebody in that press release, they have to be, because I never wanted just to take the quote that was in the press release. I want to talk to the person and get my own quote because it makes my story better. And so you're building the press release so people are interested in you and want to interact with you more and put people in articles and stuff like that. And I would always laugh. And then obviously I ended up switching to marketing. I do journalism on the side in like other markets, but they would always make me laugh. I'm like, why are you putting this as the media contact? I'm contacting you. I'm a person of the media and I'm not able to get in contact with this executive. And that's the whole point of it. So
Yeah.
sometimes it's the littlest things that can make you the most successful.
Yes. I'm shocked sometimes when I hear missteps. Just like, oh, okay. Well,
Yep. So, switching gears a little bit, but you are headed to Austin, Texas for the TMSA Elevate Conference June 8th through 10th, and this will be your first TMSA Elevate. So, I'm curious, what are you hoping to gain from the experience to take back from to your team?
yes, I'm excited to be there. I think I'm excited simply to meet other sales, marketing, communication folks that are working in supply chain. I think that I'm excited for the panels and discussions and topics we're going to discuss. I wouldn't say I'm new to supply chain, especially coming from aviation. Obviously transportation, even though it's direct to consumer, certainly a lot of overlap. But still, I'm still learning kind of the intricacies of how transportation, particularly in freight, the area of freight, interact with the rest of the supply chain and interact with their customers and their shippers. And so hopefully going to pick up some more insights there. And really just kind of going back to all of this, right, with thought leadership and what I do supporting clients is I'm a curious person. And so I want to hear from the folks working in sales and marketing and transportation. What are their challenges? What are they thinking about? What is top of mind for them? And that allows me to come back and think about how can I support that, and how can Warner support that for its current clients and for future clients.
Absolutely. I'm really proud of the education lineup this year. It's like we're now in that stage where all the pieces are coming together and we're able to like finally start showing people exactly what's going to come out. So I'm really, really excited for that. Happy to have you there. And I do think, like you said, the best way to be a thought leader is to read, to like absorb information, all of that kind of stuff. And so I really do think events like Elevate that are designed for professional development to let you sit in and meet your people and be able to absorb that information and have real conversations while you're learning is incredibly important. And which is pretty much what you said. That was going to be one of my questions was like, how do you think that these events kind of strengthen that communication? But that's what you answered. Yeah, like I want to do all those
Well,
things and I want to learn.
yeah, and I will add to that, as far as how it strengthens the industry and strengthens each other, is that marketing and communications is a bit of a funny profession, because all these other professions have these conferences where they get to come together, information shared, learn from each other. We tend to be a little bit close to the vest in marketing and sales, especially when we're talking about within our vertical or within our
Mhm.
industry, because there's a competitiveness to it, right? It's a little bit like you don't want to accidentally reveal your secret sauce to a
Mhm.
competitor or an adjacent competitor. So unfortunately, we don't have the benefit. There are lots of associations and conferences that are broadly about marketing or broadly about communications, pulling in folks from different industries, different verticals, and those are great because it is fun to see how folks are thinking about it, what strategies people are using across different industries, and oftentimes there are things you can learn from that. But um, it is also great to just get together with folks that you have kind of, even strangers that you have an unspoken camaraderie with, because
Mhm.
like you know my life, you know what I
Mhm.
deal with. And so I think it's really good that TMSA exists, and that there's this opportunity to come together.
Absolutely, and that's exactly what we're all about, and when you kind of reached out, I was like, "Oh, this is like everything that you're looking for is kind of what we're all about." Like bringing together the sales, marketing, communications people inside the space, having real conversations around it, and even I loved that you were like, "Oh, we love to talk about like crisis management and what to talk about." I'm like, "Well, that's perfect because people need to know that." And the industry is changing, things are moving really fast, and there's misinformation all over the place. And so how do we really dive in, be able to say what's going on, what we know, what we think is going to come down? All of those things is incredibly important. So really excited to have Warner Communications as part of the show this year, and that you get to come experience it firsthand. So super pumped about that. And just yeah, we're in go time here at TMSA headquarters for Elevate, so excited for everyone to be able to see what we're executing on. But last question for you, and it's something I ask everybody who comes on the show, and that's if you could go back in time and advise a younger Jessica anything, and this could be personally or professionally, when would you go back to and what would you say?
So many to choose from, Jennifer. I don't know. Um, I oh, that's a hard question. I I don't know. I don't have a lot of, I mean, I've had a storied life. I've done a lot of different things. I've made a lot of different twists and turns, but I don't really see any of them as necessarily bad decisions. They all
Mhm.
somehow led me to where I am today. I think if anything, I would go back probably to maybe not quite the very beginning of my career, but right after grad school, just a couple of years into working at the airline, and say like, it's gonna be okay. Like, just
Mhm.
not everything is life or death. I think I'm really passionate about my work. I love it. I've been accused of being a workaholic many times, but it doesn't feel that way to me. Um, but I definitely think when I was younger, I took it all really personally.
Mhm.
And so as I've gotten older, I've been able to say, like, I can care about this, I can be passionate about what I do, but it doesn't have to define me. And I think that that would be what I would say is, go back to maybe, 25-year-old Jessica, and say, like, this doesn't have to be everything that you are. Just,
Mhm.
yeah, you can
It's
make
a
mistakes.
really of this question, that's probably the most common type of answer. Is like, go back, take a little bit more naps, drink water, trust yourself, trust
Just
the process. It's gonna be okay.
just breathe.
Mhm.
It's gonna be okay. I also would have gotten a dog
Mm.
sooner. It really helped with my sort of bringing down the stress level.
I would think too. I'm allergic to dogs, but like
No.
I think about like how many times I'm like, oh, I should go for a walk around the block. And I feel like that having a dog must be like clutch for that, like for your own like mental health and like going outside more because you have to like take care of somebody else when we
Yeah.
don't really always do an awesome job taking care of ourselves. But like that, like caretaker, like, oh, we have to take the dog for a walk. So I think about that all the time. I know
Yeah.
my kid wants a dog. I'm sure I
Oh.
will fail at some point and accept that as a part of my life. But yeah, all great advice. Excited to see you in Austin. For people that want to check out our show next week, we have Christy Knichel coming on the show. She is a powerhouse and leader of Knichel Logistics, and she is one of our Elevate speakers. And she's going to tell us her story and how she started out her career and how she took over her dad's company, but how she worked every place in the company before she did that, and what a powerhouse she is now. So excited to kind of touch base with her before the show and then see her at Elevate. And Jessica, thank you for coming on the show. It was great to have you here. And I will see you in a few weeks and hope to see
Yeah,
everybody else. Thank you.
absolutely. Thank you. I'm looking forward to meeting everyone.
Sounds good. Have a good one.
You too.